Hello, hello, and welcome. It is good to see you all. It is April 17th, 2019, and this is the A-Side Live Chat Podcast. I hope all you guys out there having a fantastic start to your week. We very much appreciate you all for joining us today. So it is back home for the both of us this week. I am back from Atlanta. My friend is still in his West Coast home, so let me bring in my guy here. You already know I am joined by the California King himself, Mr. Marc Raimondi. What's up, Marc? How's things over in the kingdom?
I am still buzzing over UFC 236. Those last two fights, man. God, I was losing my mind here at home by myself in this living room like a weird person. The dogs were looking at me like I was crazy. But man, that was just as far as final two fights go, and we'll talk about it. But God, woo, so great. I mean, it's like as good as when MMA is that good, there are few things better than MMA. And whew, man, that was that good.
It really was, man. I feel like I still am catching my breath from it, and we're so many days removed from it at this point. So we'll get to it, man, because a lot has happened since the last time we all sort of met in this collective space. UFC 236, like you said, that's come and gone, and it left us with really two Fight of the Year candidates and two new interim champions. And somehow Jon Jones in the middle of all this. Also, we have a sneaky, fun heavyweight fight later this week at UFC St. Petersburg. All of that and more today. But as we always say, this is your guys' show, so we're going to talk about whatever you want us to talk about. You can ask us a question on the MMA Fighting page below. Any question that gets 3 recommendations, those will turn green and get priority. Or you can ask us a question on Twitter using the hashtags TheASide or Chat Rappers. Also, one quick programming note. Last week around this time, we read you a promo for a new MMA Fighting podcast feed that was coming up. You guys can go ahead and disregard that. There's been a bit of a change in plans, and so I'll let you guys know what's coming as soon as I know. We should have some answers soon. We're also aware, because a lot of you guys have been hitting us up about it, that the show hasn't been showing up on Spotify lately. That's being addressed as well, so we appreciate your support and patience as all of this sort of gets figured out. In the meantime, replays of the show up on YouTube, iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, everywhere else basically except for Spotify. And with that said, Marc, you ready to do this?
Yes, sir. And by the way, it'll be up in some fashion. It may not be all one feed like we said last week, but the audio will be up on podcast in one way or another. We promise.
Yeah. It seems like it's probably not going to be that big of a change from where it is now, other than we will figure out the Spotify thing. But hey, let's jump into this, man, because we got a ton of green questions, so we got to get to them.
Yes,
this
sir.
First one is coming from the X Factor version 2. All right. UFC pay-per-view 5-round co-mains. Adesanya versus Gastelum was an absolute war. And although it was for another interim title, I am sure many can agree this fight hugely benefited from the 5-round treatment. Would you like to see more pay-per-view co-main events get the 5-round treatment, especially the number one contender fights? If so, should it be for an interim title to justify it? It just seems like promotional malpractice. Nice callback on the UFC's part that we have 5-round fight night main events such as the upcoming Overeem versus Oleinik fight that don't have much at stake as some of the 3-round pay-per-view co-main events. So this is an interesting question, Marc, and I think this is one that people have been talking about. Really, I mean, Dana White sort of brought it up in the post-cut fight press conference on Saturday, where it was a weird angle to take of just like, hey, see why this is why interim fights matter type of. That was a weird perspective to take after you've seen 2 of the best fights ever. But Marc, what do you think about this?
Yes, sir. So the whole 5-round fight thing, it's kind of a double-edged sword, and I have mixed feelings about it because on one hand, I feel like when it is the absolute best fighters in the sport, the elite of the elite, the title contenders, the title fights. I guess you can throw interim title fights in there too. In order to find out who the best fighter is of those two, a 5-round fight to me is preferable. A 3-round fight goes a whole different way if Adesanya and Gastelum are in that on Saturday. A whole different fight. Whereas I think that now we have a good idea of who is who and what both of them are made of as far as the division goes. On the other hand, and I think we actually have a question about this in a few questions here, and we'll address it more there. But 5-round fights are incredibly taxing on fighters. As we saw, Both of those guys got hit in the head quite a lot of times, especially in the 4th and 5th round as they were continuing to fatigue. So I think that the key is that if it's going to be a 5-round fight, you have to pay the fighters like it's a 5-round fight. And the UFC is explaining that, well, if it's an interim title fight, which is a 5-round fight, that's when the fighters start getting more money. That doesn't need to be the case. I mean, it doesn't have to be for an interim title. The UFC can decide to give the fighters money just for a 5-round fight. It doesn't really matter if it's the UFC makes up the rules. I mean, there weren't even 5-round non-title fights in main events up until a few years ago. So it really is the UFC dictating all of that. They make their own rules, and now they're saying they can't break the made-up rules. But anyway, I like the idea of 5-round fights on paper, as long as the fighters are fairly compensated for those fights.
Yeah, that part made me laugh. Of the sort of, see, this is why the interim titles are so important, because fighters can get paid more. It's like, you guys could just pay them more.
Yeah,
like,
I mean, you guys make the rules. I mean, the UFC makes the rules, all the rules.
Like, you're kind of going along your own arbitrary rule set that by trying to use this as a point after we've seen these two great fights. But it is an interesting conversation just about what deserves a 5-round fight as a whole, because I remember having this conversation years ago, and I can't remember what card exactly it was, but it was when Carlos Condit and Tyron Woodley were about to fight as the co-main. And it was basically a #1 contenders fight. And Carlos,
it was UFC 171, headlined by Johnny Hendricks and Robbie Lawler, right?
Actually, that might be the first event me and you met.
The first time we met in person. How about that?
Yeah, we saw that guy crash on the side of the street like 3 minutes into meeting each other. But no, Carlos brought it up to me in that instance because he's obviously he performs well in 5-round fights. He kind of snowballs rolling down a hill type of thing, gets better as the fight goes on, and he knew that would benefit him. So I kind of went back and looked at, since the beginning of 2018, sort of every pay-per-view and the co-main event. So if you'll indulge me really quickly, this is pay-per-view since 2018 and the co-main event. 220 would be DC Ozdemir. That was already a title fight. 221, now we're starting to get there. Blades versus Hunt. I don't know that would need to be 5 rounds. That's a very arbitrary one, right? 222, Ortega versus Edgar. That could have been 5 rounds. That was a #1 contender fight. 223 was Rose versus Joanna. Obviously, that's a title fight. 224 was Gastelum Jacare. That, to me, doesn't feel like it needs to be 5 rounds. 25 was Covington RDA. That was an interim title fight, so that was 5 rounds. 226 was Lewis Ngannou, which I think we would have said beforehand could be 5 rounds, and I think afterwards everyone's very happy that it wasn't. 227 is Cejudo DJ. That was a title fight. 228, Andrade versus Karolina Kowalkiewicz. That was a #1 contender fight, so you could sort of make the case, but I don't know that people wanted that for 5 rounds. And very quickly, Ferguson Pettis was next, then Jacare, Weidman, and then you have 2 more title fights: Shevchenko, Joanna, Nunes, Cyborg. 234 didn't really matter because of the Robert Whittaker dropout, but Izzy Anderson would have been a fun 5-round fight. And then the last 2 have been title fights as well: Usman Woodley and Adesanya Gastelum. So really, over this past 14, 15, 16-month stretch, you have maybe 3 to 5-ish fights that would have been affected by this kind of rule. So it's hard to make it a definitive rule, right? Because I don't think anybody needs Curtis Blades versus Mark Hunt for 5 rounds. I do like the idea, though, of a picking and choosing and being selective with it, where if we know going into a fight that this is going to be a #1 contender fight, this is going to be a fight where the winner will probably end up moving on to that title, I like that being a 5-round fight. If you can make that a very definitive stakes, that to me feels more deserving of a 5-round fight rather than, Alistair Overeem versus Alexei Oleinik.
So that's like an interim title, is what you're saying. Because, I mean, technically the winner of an interim title fight is supposed to go on to fight the champion in that division, right?
Yeah, basically.
But you're saying even if it's not for an interim title, if it's a #1 contender fight, that should be 5 rounds.
Yeah, and that's what we always talk about on this show all the time, right? It's just stakes. We just want stakes. We want something to attach to the fight. I like
stakes very much.
Yeah, stakes make the fight more interesting.
Steak medium rare. What? Oh, sorry.
Stakes make the fight more fun. Stakes make everything seem more important. And so that's why these fights felt very important on Saturday, because we knew what was on the line, right? Even if there wasn't an interim title on the line, and we knew that, hey, if Dustin Poirier wins this fight, he will absolutely get that shot at Khabib that he has been waiting for forever. I don't know that the stakes would have felt lessened that much.
I agree, and the only issue that I have with the idea that if it's number one contender fight, it gets 5 rounds, is that what really is a number one contender fight in the UFC at this point? There is no guarantee that the winner of any of these fights gets a title shot. It all depends on the UFC schedule. So I'm a little bit hesitant to say that while I agree in principle, you want the best fighters to fight for 5 rounds, the very elite. I just don't know if that is the right criteria, because it's just so the UFC is very arbitrary with who they give title shots to and when.
Yeah. Well, hey, before we move on, let's just at least talk some positivity about these 2 fights, because they were effing incredible, man. I was in the arena, the State Farm Arena, for these fights, and the co-main was maybe the loudest I've ever heard in arena, which is wild considering all the amount of fights I've gone to. Is that your front runner for fight of the year right now?
I mean, okay, so I think and this may be a bit of a hot take. I think Adesanya versus Gastelum is the best fight I've seen since Lawler McDonald.
Wow.
The best fight I think I've seen since Robbie Lawler versus Rory McDonald at UFC 189.
So better than Condit Lawler.
Yes, I would say no doubt about it.
Better than Diaz McGregor too.
That's a tough one, but I would say not in terms of what was on the line and just the sheer spectacle and the mainstream attention that it got. But as far as just the fight, I would say yes.
And better than Justin Gaethje versus etc.
Justin Gaethje versus the world. Yes. I mean, as good as those fights were against Alvarez and Poirier,
Michael Johnson.
I'll throw that one in there too. Yes, because of the stakes of that fight as well. And it was just an incredible fight. I mean, God, it was a war of attrition. I mean, just the way that both guys had to battle back from adversity on multiple occasions throughout the fight. It was tied going into the last round. I mean, it was up for grabs going into the last few minutes of the fight. Both guys were busted up. I mean, that one scramble where
Izzy's got some jiu-jitsu,
triangle, and then Gastelum hit like a Peterson roll. Oh my God, that fight was so good.
Izzy's got some jiu-jitsu, man. Izzy's really got some jiu-jitsu. That was slick down there what he was doing. I think because we've had a couple
concussed, and then he was exhausted at that point too, but his instincts took over. Oh, that was just so good.
I think one of my favorite parts about this fight and why I like this fight so much, other than the obvious, because now we've had a couple days to kind of digest it, is how much we really learned about both of these men in like such a positive way for both. But I feel like we coming out of this fight knowing both of these men on such a more intimate personal level and just like what they're capable of than I think anybody really imagined beforehand. We really genuinely learned something about Israel Adesanya and Kelvin Gastelum on Saturday.
I would say especially Adesanya, because this is a guy who is a high-level kickboxer. He's very flashy. And when you think about guys who are flashy fighters, who throw a lot of flashy techniques, you don't normally equate them right away with gritty, tough fighters who come back from a beating and win 5-round wars like that. He is not a finesse fighter. If someone said he was a finesse fighter last week, okay, I could see what you're trying to say. That label is long gone.
Yeah, and I thought that was cool because I asked him about that in the post-fight press conference. We're just like, man, what is that like? Like, what is that moment like when you're viscerally just in this firefight? And his answer was interesting to me, of just like, it's real dark. I go into that dark place and it's just a real dark place. I don't know, man. These guys have different. They're wired differently than you and I.
Yeah, no kidding. I can't even wrap my brain around that kind of mental toughness to do what they did. Kudos to those guys. I mean,
absolute respect. Absolute respect.
Yeah.
Well, hey, let's keep it moving and let's talk about this main event, because that is what's the next question. G-Reb77 wants to talk about Max Holloway at lightweight. After seeing Max versus Dustin Poirier, how do you think Max will fare against the top 5 at lightweight? The power the difference in power seemed significant. We know Dustin Poirier can bang, but so can several of the top lightweights. What does Max have to do to adjust to lightweight, style-wise, bulk up, etc.? And so this is an interesting question to me because this is sort of something that people were talking about a little bit before the fight, but not enough, where Max Holloway wasn't just jumping up to 155 pounds, right? He was actually jumping up to 155 pounds against maybe the most powerful puncher in that whole lightweight division. I know people don't think of Dustin Poirier in that way, but it has been proven time and time again that this evolved version of him is either the most powerful puncher or the second most powerful puncher in this entire division. And you could see it in that fight. Max was landing shots, but Dustin was landing shots. Like, he was moving Max with his punches. It seemed like everything was a power punch. What did you come out of that fight thinking about Max Holloway's prospects at lightweight?
I mean, losing to Dustin Poirier, I'll say off the bat, does not preclude you from being an elite lightweight, because Dustin Poirier is one of the top 155ers in the world. There's no doubt about it. I think the big difference for Max wasn't necessarily even the power, although there was a disparity in power. Not every 55er hits as hard as Poirier does, as we know. I think that it was actually a matter of the distance and the reach. I think that in 145, Holloway has a pretty decent reach advantage over his opponents, and he manages distance very well against those opponents and kind of stays at the end of his punches and does not allow them to get inside that. So, like, for instance, like there were times where when he was fighting Brian Ortega and he was pressing forward, he was keeping that manageable distance from Ortega so that he can land shots, but Ortega can't really counter effectively. Whereas against Poirier, he couldn't do that. He was keeping the same distance and he was hitting Poirier, but Poirier was tagging him right back with hard counter shots. And I think that's kind of where the difference was to me. I think that it's a stylistic tweak. Look, I think Max Holloway is the top 5 lightweight probably in the world at this point. I mean, he still won 5 rounds. He still won that 3rd round. I thought that there were times where he could have taken over, where Holloway's volume in that 3rd round would have wilted a normal man, but Dustin Poirier is not a normal man. So he could have won that fight. And I don't want to take anything away from Holloway. I think there are just some stylistic tweaks that he can make. His punching power is not going to get exponentially better at this point in his career, but he can make those stylistic tweaks and be. I mean, he can still be the top lightweight in the world if he makes some adjustments, I think.
Not only would his volume have wilted most other men, but his sheer ability to take damage on that vibranium chin of his would have psyched out more men than not, man, because the amount of damage he was taking for Dustin Poirier and just continually going forward. And it didn't matter. Like, that was one of the most incredible parts of that fight to me, because how many power shots did Max Holloway eat? And I don't know that he was really rocked at all in the fight. I mean, he was rocked in occasional moments, but there was never like that big, like, oh, Max Holloway's about to lose this fight type of moment, which is nuts considering what Dustin hit him with. It's an interesting question now of what happens with Max at 155, because if he comes back to 155 at any point, and I imagine at some point down the line he will, because that 145 cut is going to get harder and harder for him to make, and it already kind of has. I would like him to sort of do the Amanda Nunes, right? Do what Dustin Poirier did, where you got to really acclimatize your body to 155, build up some muscle, build up sort of some size, and then make that move to 55. Because this one was pretty willy-nilly. It was kind of just like it was a fun opportunity. I spoke to Dustin, a few weeks beforehand when I went to ATT, and I asked him about, what does that move actually mean? Like, when you make that move, how long until you feel like an actual lightweight? And he told me as much that, he did well as soon as he went to lightweight, but it wasn't until maybe 2 or 3 or 4 fights in that he actually felt like a real lightweight, where he had built up some size, he had some time to build up some muscle, and your body just gets used to going to 55 as opposed to 45. And that's a big difference. And I think that we saw that difference inside the cage. Like, Dustin just looked like the bigger guy, even though Max was taller. And at this point, I think it's hard for Dustin to make 155. So the idea of him going to 45, your body just changes, right? So Max is probably like you said, I would say he's probably a top 5 lightweight in the world. If you throw him in there against an Edson Barboza or somebody like that, who are you favoring, right? I'd probably favor Max, but just because you lose to Dustin doesn't mean it's the end of the world. But if he does come back, I would like to see him take some time on that comeback if he's going to move back up to 155 again in the future.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, if he moves to 55 again in the future, I think that he will have to commit to that weight class, because basically he came into that fight as the same guy who cuts the 45, except he just didn't cut the final 10 pounds, right? I mean, that's pretty much the frame that he carries at 145 was the frame that he took into the fight at 155. And Poirier, if you do a side-by-side comparison as to his Poirier 145 and Poirier 155 in 2019, there's a stark difference in body frames, and there's a lot more muscle on Poirier now.
Also, a lot better haircut.
A lot better haircut makes a huge difference. Makes a huge difference.
It's a long quality hair.
When you got a head of hair like that, how can you take it away? Right?
Absolutely. Well, hey, let's keep it moving. And this next question is coming from Hefe01. And he wants to talk about UFC pay-per-view model problems. I live 15 miles outside of a good-sized city. I have Comcast. That's clever. Cable internet that is really hit or miss. I don't have the confidence to pay $60 and pray that my internet holds. I'm getting older and the bar or even bar restaurant isn't an option anymore. So what am I supposed to do? Or am I simply part of the small cost of doing business? And he put that last part in quotes. So this is interesting, Mark, because you maybe you can tell me, right? Because I obviously was in the arena. I didn't order the pay-per-view for this one. It seemed as though when I threw the question out on Twitter of like, hey, how's this buying experience going for everybody? It seemed like there were a lot of problems with ESPN Plus, and Dana White even said as much so after the fact. I don't know that some of those are obviously going to be resolved in terms of making it easier for people to buy through the app, etc. But if you're just out in the Midwest and you have no internet, right? Or you have slow internet, or you have poor internet, or you're out in just kind of a no man's land where there's not a lot of people, it's not a highly populated area. Are you just up a creek without a paddle?
It's possible. And I had some early issues trying to order the pay-per-view. So I went on, so basically when ESPN Plus shows are on, I usually stream them from my phone because I have a lot of activity going on my laptop working. No dirty comments to that. I have a lot of activity going on my laptop with work and everything. So it's hard to cast from my laptop. There's a little bit of a lag. So I always use my phone to cast it, and it works. It has worked great in the past. And I went to log on at 7 Pacific for the pay-per-view, and I got the message basically saying like you can't purchase this event on your phone. So I was like, huh. So I had to go. It was an easy fix. I had to go back on my browser on my laptop. I had to buy the pay-per-view from the browser, from the laptop, and then once it was already purchased, then I could watch it. Then I could watch it on my phone and cast it from my phone. And then I think, and I don't know for sure, but from what I've seen from other reports and other situations like this, I think that there may be an issue with if you purchase something on your phone, like on an Apple phone, you have to kick like a certain percentage to Apple. And I think that might have been the issue with this first one, where I guess they were not prepared to send a percentage to Apple for that. So Dana White said in the post-fight press conference that it's going to change, and you'll be able to purchase right on the app next time. So that'll be good for those who want to watch on their phone or their mobile device, or even like a. Can you hear that?
Yeah.
I don't know what that was. Something outside. Anyway, but to answer your question about people who are in places with poor internet, I don't really know what the workaround is there, man. I really don't know how to remedy that situation. It seems like not even just with ESPN Plus and this pay-per-view issue. I mean, that's just the way of the world right now. Everything is going streaming. Like, how do you watch Netflix? I mean, how do you watch anything on your streaming devices if you have it? I mean, all this cable stuff and regular television is still prevalent now, but in 5 years, I mean, I think most big things are going to be on streaming.
Yeah, but there is a big difference on watching something on Netflix, right? Where it's already made and you have the whole product and you kind of load the whole thing,
Right.
as opposed to live streaming a live sporting event. That can get rough. And I honestly, this might be a blind spot, man. I don't know that this is going to get better unless someone is able to improve their internet, right? Because that's kind of like the UFC can't go and improve someone's own internet, or ESPN Plus can't go and improve someone's own internet. This might just be the cost of doing business, as this gentleman put it, for the UFC to have made this move, a move that is very lucrative for them, but may also be disenfranchising some fans in the Midwest and also just other places where I don't know that there's an actual solution to this.
Yeah, I mean, it's a shame because the UFC is making a ton of money on this, and ESPN Plus, I believe, has 2 million subscribers already. So they may not be making a lot of money right now on the streaming service, but they probably will in a few years. And I guess some people get left behind, unfortunately, and that sucks. I mean, that's a shame. I don't know what the alternative method is. When WWE started their WWE network in, I believe it was 2014, all the pay-per-views are on the network. You subscribe, it's one cost per month. You watch them right on the network. However, if you have those streaming issues, those pay-per-views are still available on your regular cable system, the way that you purchased it in the past. So that is a workaround for them. You know, you can still order WrestleMania on DirecTV if you wanted to. I don't know why you'd want to, but in this situation where you have poor internet, that's a possibility. But I mean, the internet's got to get better. I mean, hopefully in those places, the internet, the Wi-Fi improves. I don't know. I live in LA. I mean, I guess I'm spoiled, but it sucks.
Yeah. One last aside before we move on this topic. It was interesting last week. There was an article. I think it was, I don't want to say incorrectly, but I think it was Lance Pugmire of the LA Times, who spoke to Bob Arum of Top Ranks, basically, you know, one of the Dana White, more or less, of boxing, or at least of that side of boxing, of Top Rank. And he said that effectively that this UFC deal moving to ESPN Plus has been a big boon for them when it comes to negotiations with DirecTV, because now there's sort of a nuclear option, right? Because they could just be like, well, one of your big money makers already left you. We'll just leave you too. Like, this is already a thing that started. We can just now, it's giving them incredible leverage in negotiations with DirecTV. So it's just interesting to see the far-reaching implications of this deal that I think we're still starting to figure out. Because even when over the last week, when I was in Atlanta, I asked a lot of the main players, what do you think about this move to pay-per-view where it's probably going to affect your purse? You're not getting these pay-per-view points to a degree that you would have before. And no one really had a good answer, and no one even was really that aware of it to a degree. Like, Max Holloway was the most aware of it, and he was a champion, obviously. He's the one that has been fighting with pay-per-view points for a while. And even he just sort of, you know, just accepted it. He more or less just was like, here's how you have to order the new one. We're just going to have to embrace this and figure it out. There's a lot of details that are going to be, oh my God, my dog is losing her mind. There's like a fly in this room and she's just like smashing against this desk trying to get it. But yeah, no, it's just, I think we're still figuring out the ramifications of this deal to a degree and we will be for a while.
Yeah. I mean, there are some growing pains, and one last thing about your Bob Arum quote. Pay-per-view made almost all of their money on three things. It was pro wrestling, WWE, it was MMA, the UFC, and boxing. Those were the big things that were on pay-per-view. That's where they made the bulk of their revenue. They've lost WWE. All that stuff is on WWE Network now. They've lost the UFC. All that stuff is on ESPN Plus. So yeah, so boxing is it right now, and they'll be able to write their own contracts. I mean, they have all the leverage in the world, which is great for them, but bad for the pay-per-view industry.
Yeah. All right. Next fight up. Evie, you gotta relax, buddy. Hey, please. She's like shaking my desk with how much she's freaking out. Next up is coming from Philosophical Perspective, who wants to know about Max the 45 King. Hi, boys. My favorite Wednesday boys, Mr. Sons, and the Raven One, and the California King. Yes, I had to. The ass licker is back. This is just off to a great start. And Marc, we all know this is not a family show. This is a male-dominated show with thirst for violence and some martial arts. Let us stay real. But with that said, I believe in hope. All shape and forms are more than welcome to join the party. This is off the rails already. What is going on here? First question, 5 rounds. Really? I am a hardcore MMA and boxing fan. I love violence inside a set of rules, but I have also worked in the field of mental health and brain rehab for more than 10 years. Those 5-round wars are great for our viewing pleasure, but probably terrible for the fighters' long-term health, and they do not get paid enough, in my opinion. Can we really support these 5 rounds morally? People like me get to take care of these fighters when they're older. I am for freedom of choice, but the UFC is not a company built around high moral standards. How do you think, boys? Cheers from Sweden. That was a tremendous introduction to that question. I have to say the first 2 paragraphs were something else.
Yeah.
So we already discussed a little bit
about no, it is a very good question.
It is a good question. We already discussed a little bit about 5 rounds, but this is a little bit more different way to look at it. And also kind of revisits what we talked about. I don't know whether it was last week or the week before. I think it might have been last week about bare knuckle and sort of the ethical ramifications that came from that of this is great, but is it really, can we morally accept watching this? And I have to admit, man, I kind of side on the same plane when it comes to this, where it's just like, this is the sport, right? Like, this is a really violent sport. When you see a Robbie Lawler versus Rory McDonald, or you see a fight like we saw on Saturday, there is a bit of it's a tough pill to swallow in some regard, but it also is just beautiful in such a way that transcends, I think, a lot any other sport that I can think of.
It's yeah, we're watching violence, and we've spoken about this a number of times where it's almost easy to forget that we're watching 2 people fight in a cage, and that's what it is. I mean, it's pretty plain, and to other people they may think that MMA fans are crazy or deluded or something of that nature, but it's something that we enjoy watching, and it's something that these fighters enjoy producing for our pleasure and of course for money. It's sometimes when you're in the bubble, you have to kind of like step aside and like actually look at it for what it is. 5-round fights, until like someone from like the Association of Ringside Physicians or someone like that who knows way more about that stuff than I do comes out and says maybe we should rethink this whole 5-round idea. Maybe there's too much damage being done. That it's a stark difference from like a 3-round fight. Then we can have that conversation. But I just don't. I mean, I'm not a scientist. I'm not a doctor. I don't know enough about that to say for sure if a 5-round fight is that much worse for a fighter than a 3-round fight is. I mean, I imagine it's worse because the more time that you spend in the cage, the more chance that there is to get damage that could be long-term damage. So yeah, it's worse, but is it so much worse that maybe we should be rethinking even doing 5-round fights? I've never seen that from any professional or expert, so I can't really say for sure myself.
Well, here, 1 second, because I want to single out one sentence in particular that Mr. Philosophical Perspective here put in his question, and it was one that struck me sort of in the aftermath as we have sort of the conversation has revolved around UFC 236, and that is that the fighters are not getting paid enough to warrant this, and that is something. I mean, I've reported the salaries on Monday for this event. And all the 4 championship fighters made 6 figures, but nobody made even $500,000 for this fight. The highest was $350,000 by a couple of different guys. And you know, whenever we report these salaries, there's always the inevitable, these guys aren't getting paid enough. These guys aren't getting paid enough reaction to it. But I can't remember a more strong and visceral reaction to salaries being reported than for this event, maybe ever. And it surprised me in a way. It made me feel good about MMA fans in a way. Also, though, they're right? Like when you watch guys really just take years off their life, like we did on Saturday for our enjoyment, for their glory, etc., and then they come out and they're getting paid less than, you know, some undercard boxers, some boxers who you know aren't nearly as popular, and that's that sort of situation. It's a hard thing to look at, man. It is a really hard thing to look at. Looking at those salaries and seeing that, you know, a guy like Kelvin Gastelum got $150,000 for a fight like that. That's rough to handle. And I think I was actually proud of the MMA community's like unanimous reaction to that.
I hope that those salaries were not the whole story. Those numbers listed by the commission. I really, really hope that, because when I saw that on Monday, I was I was pretty upset because we had just watched these two great interim title fights on Saturday. I mean, we're talking about, again, like I said, it was two of the best fights to close the UFC show in recent memory, and I think that Adesanya versus Gastelum was one of the best fights I've ever seen in my entire life. And then to see that Gastelum made 150K for that fight, where he's literally putting his long-term health at risk in a fight like that. I mean, there's no doubt about it. I mean, I'm sure.
Well, especially because he's the only one who's not going to go on to make more in his next fight, right? Because Izzy's going to go on to do a title unification match. Same with Dustin Poirier. Max Holloway is still a champion, so he's still going to make champion money. Kelvin Gastelum's the only one that kind of has to return back to the contendership status, and so he is the one who gets impacted the most by that. It's difficult, man. It's difficult for me to reconcile. I'm not going to lie.
I agree. I completely agree. I can only say that I hope that there was more to that, not just the fight night bonus that all of them got, which is great, 50K, but it should be much more than that. If you look at how much like a Vasyl Lomachenko makes for one boxing match, I would say that probably all four of those guys are more well known than Lomachenko is. I know that Lomachenko is a great fighter. He's one of the pound for pound best in boxing. I love watching him fight. But as far as name value and how much money his name makes for whoever, for the promoter, those four guys in the main events on Saturday are just as well known as Lomachenko is. His pay-per-view numbers have been comparable to like or even less than like a Demetrius Johnson type, or his rating numbers are kind of like that. So it's a tough one. I really hope that those guys are getting paid more than what we saw on Monday, because they deserve it. They're making money for the company, and in 15 years when they're in their 40s or whatever, and they don't have a retirement plan, there's no pension, there's no 401k, they're gonna need that money, and it's gonna be tough. And hopefully all of them have their their wits about them at that age, because after a fight like that, they're getting hit in the head many times. And as Philosophical Perspective said, there are long-term repercussions for that kind of fight.
Yeah. Well, hey, let's keep things moving, man. Let's talk about sort of a weird storyline that emerged from this past weekend. Israel Adesanya versus Jon Jones. Joke or genius? And this is coming from Ted Bear. Howdy, fellas. Adesanya, a mid-sized middleweight, who I will add weighed in 183 pounds. So this whole conversation is a little strange to me. Doesn't stand a chance against Jon Jones, right? This is what he writes. But maybe his feud is smart. He obviously won't fight him right away, and who knows, maybe he'll catch Jones on his downturn. What do you make of all of this, Marc Raimondi?
If that fight happened in 2019, I don't think it's even a competitive fight, and I don't even know what weight class it would be at. And that's not to say that I think Adesanya is not a very good fighter or an elite fighter. I think he is.
Izzy would just have to wear like ankle weights to weigh that.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It's a size issue. It's a size issue. Adesanya weighs in at 183. He doesn't cut a whole lot to get to 185.
That was 183 with a hair pick and some shorts, I think.
Yeah, I mean he's not going through these hard 20-25 pound weight cuts that a lot of guys go through, or even more than that. Whereas Jon Jones probably walks somewhere in the 220s, 230s, something in that vicinity. Even when I think he's in shape, I think Jones is in the 220s at least. So we're talking about a difference of 20-30 pounds probably if they were to get into the cage together on fight night. So that's not a competitive fight in my mind. I mean, also it doesn't make sense right now because Adesanya is not even the champion in his division. He's the interim champion. He's still got to beat a very, very, very good Robert Whittaker sometime later this year. Whereas Jon Jones is kind of, he's been the dominant champion of light heavyweight for a long time with, some ups and downs there, of course, as we know, with his absences from the cage. But I mean, the beef has me intrigued because I think that there is some really interesting elements there, and I think that both guys have oversized personalities, and I kind of like the dynamic of the two of them going at it together. But in the cage, I'm not seeing a very competitive fight, at least right now. If Adesanya puts on some weight later on, and then we can talk. But right now, it's not a very good fight.
Yeah, this is really one for like 3 or 4 years down the line if both these guys continue to actually be as dominant as they have been so far, right? But let me ask you, man, because this has been something I'm wondering too. Is it a good look for Jon Jones to be punching down at all these people in the lighter weight classes so commonly?
I don't mind it. Someone like Adesanya, I don't consider that even punching down. I mean, I guess in terms of weight, it's punching down, but Adesanya is going to be a big star, and Jon Jones wants those big paydays. He wants those big fights. And even if we don't think it's going to be a competitive fight inside the cage, that fight will make money. That fight will make some pretty damn good money, and more money than some of the contenders right now at light heavyweight that he has, like Thiago Santos, who's a bigger name. Israel Adesanya or Thiago Santos. I mean, that's pretty obvious.
I'm just saying, this man has hunted a lot of middleweights in his days. Chael Sonnen, Vitor Belfort, Anthony Smith, Thiago Santos, Israel Adesanya.
Yeah, but he's also beaten every light heavyweight that there is to beat.
Sure.
Every single one of them. So if he has to go outside the division, it's not because he hasn't beaten everyone.
All I'm saying is hunt some heavyweights, man. I just want to see it.
Okay, I mean, I'm down for that too. I'm down for that too. I would love to see Jones fight Miocic. He was talking about fighting Miocic a few weeks ago. So
yeah, he teased it the same day that Santos fought him. It's just he knows what we want. He's just not going to give it to us.
Hey, you got to pay the man. I'm cool with that. I'm cool with that. He knows his value. You got to put that money out there for him.
You want to handle the next one?
Yeah. Well, speaking of Jon Jones, from Hefe 01, Luke Rockhold versus Jon Jones. Let me start by saying I've been a fan of Luke Rockhold since his early Strikeforce days. I was quite happy to see him wear UFC gold after beating Weidman. But then he decides that the best fight for him is to go to heavyweight and fight Fabricio Verdum. Things settle down and he returns to middleweight. What? Now, even though he's actually moving up to light heavyweight, it seems like he should at least get a fight or two before going straight after Jon Jones. I know you have to plant the seed, and confidence helps grow that seed, but I think he's barking up the wrong tree. At least wait until he has an actual fight with someone in the top 10 of the division. Thoughts? Well, let me just say off the bat, I don't think Rockhold was ever actually angling to fight Fabricio Verdum. They had some...
Oh, no, that was actually a thing that he wanted.
He really wanted to go to heavyweight and fight Verdum?
He offered that to matchmakers. He genuinely wanted to do that.
But that was never like in the works, or that was never like...
No, it was never going to happen. Ever going to happen.
All right. So what are your thoughts? Do you think that Rockhold is barking up the wrong tree, as Hefe says, by trying to get that Jon Jones fight?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not, man. You if you're going to that division, if I'm moving to a division and you're the champion, Marc Raimondi, I have to go to that division with the complete confidence that I can beat Marc Raimondi. Like that, you can't go there, I'm trying to I was going to say a word, but it's probably not a good word. So you can't go there like kind of skittering around and the issue, right? You got to go there hunting right for the top. And that's what he's doing. And I'm actually really intrigued by it, man. A lot of people have been crapping on Luke Rockhold since he made these comments on Monday. I actually really kind of understand where he's coming from, right? Because if you look at sort of the rough run that he's had over the last couple of years and the issues that he has faced over those couple of years, what are the two issues that have been the big issues, right? Injuries and a chinniness, an ability to get knocked out easier than maybe others, which I don't subscribe to because the shot that he got knocked out with by Yoel Romero would have killed a horse. Like, just a ridiculous punch. But if those are the two issues, what have we seen from every single person ever who has moved up in weight, more or less, and like done so in a way that they've really committed to it, like a Thiago Santos or an Anthony Smith? We're seeing more fluid in their head so they can take more shots. Their body is just generally sustained better, so their chinniness goes away a little bit. Also, the injuries. Luke even mentioned this himself. The time you get injured the most in camp is when you're at sort of that peak weight cut time, those last few weeks before the fight, where you're really like trying to train hard, but also trying to cut that weight. And your body, like Luke says, just becomes really, really brittle. And I don't know how this man ever made 185. You and I have both stood next to Luke Rockhold. He is a gigantic human being. Like, it never made sense to me how he made 185, and it seemed like it got incredibly, impossibly hard for him by the end. I want to see what a full-strength Luke Rockhold looks like. If Anthony Smith and Thiago Santos look this much better at light heavyweight to where Thiago Santos is eating bombs from Jimmy Manuwa and he just keep coming forward, I want to see what Luke Rockhold looks like with that, because this was really someone who a few years ago we were talking about the fight between him and Chris Weidman as a fight between maybe two of the best middleweights ever. Like, his stock has fallen so much over the last couple of years just because of the way I think he handles himself, but also the way that his last few fights have gone. Luke Rockhold is a genuine killer, and it feels like people have forgotten this.
I agree completely, and you can't say that he's barking up the wrong tree, because there's already a blueprint in place for middleweights moving up and fighting for the title. Anthony Smith just did it, and Thiago Santos is about to do it, and Luke Rockhold had a much better run of success at middleweight than either of those guys did by a wide margin. So why wouldn't Luke Rockhold be confident that he can come to 205 and fight Jon Jones in relatively short order? Also, I think that Hefe mentioned that hasn't even fought a top 10 opponent. Well, he's fighting Jan Blachowicz. So I mean, if he gets that win over Jan Blachowicz coming up, then I mean, I don't know if he gets the title shot right away off the bat after beating Jan. I think he may need one more fight, but you never know. I mean, who would be? Is there a clear next contender for Jones after Thiago Santos? I wouldn't say there's a clear anything.
I don't think he'll need one more fight. If he goes in there,
that's it. If
he goes in there and scores a knockout and cuts a promo on the mic about Jon Jones, that's the fight they're gonna make.
Yeah.
I mean, the story is there, and I'm into it. I am all in on that, of him trying to come and defend DC's honor, and DC would be involved in that lead up somehow, and it would become like almost a mini version of DC Jones 3. Like, that just seems fun. I'm in on that.
This is light heavyweight rankings right now, and again, we know about the rankings, and they're not great. But Jones is the champ. DC is number 1 still at light heavyweight, so that ship has sailed. He's never going back to 205. Gustafsson is number 2, and I don't think anyone's clamoring for a third fight between those two guys anytime soon. Jones versus Gus. Thiago Santos is number 3. He's getting the shot. Then you have Anthony Smith, who just got the shot. He's going to fight Gustafsson coming up here in a couple months. And again, I think the winner of that fight will still need more to do in order to get that title shot against Jones again. Then you have Dominic Reyes at number 5, who, look, I think he's very, very good, and I think he has a lot of room to grow still. But he didn't look all that impressive in his last fight. He didn't do anything in that fight that made a huge statement to make you say, like, I want to see Dominic Reyes fight Jon Jones right now. I think that in time we'll get there, but not right now. And then you have Jan Blachowicz at number 6. So if Luke Rockhold beats Blachowicz, who really has a better case than Luke Rockhold? I mean, it's not crazy to say.
No, and Jon has already said repeatedly that he's trying to do this year as one after the other, after the other, after the other. Just line them up, and I'm going to try to go through as many as I can to make up for lost time. The only fight that I think that if Luke Rockhold wins, he would not get thrown into a Jon Jones fight in place of this fight, would be the Anthony Smith fight. If the UFC feels there is something there and they want to do the Anthony Smith fight because there is such immense hatred on that within that fight, when our good friend Ariel Helwani asked Anthony Smith about Luke Rockhold at that press conference, he couldn't even get through his question without Anthony Smith, who is, by all accounts, a very, very nice man, one of the most nice, polite men in this industry, blowing up Luke Rockhold's spot in a way that I haven't really seen Anthony Smith speak about anybody else, any human being on the planet. I'm here for that.
Where does that even come from? Why do those guys hate each other so much? I don't get it.
Well, because Luke was very dismissive and flippant about Anthony, and I think Anthony takes that stuff very personally, man.
Yeah, I mean, Anthony Smith is, like you said, just like a very mild-mannered, soft-spoken guy. And that was like, whoa, he really hates Luke Rockhold a lot. He really hates that man.
For real, man. Well, hey, let's keep speaking of hatred. Let's keep it going. And the next question's coming from Combat Chief.
Yes.
He wants to talk about this welterweight division that's red hot right now. He says, between Woodley Lawler and the Askren Masvidal fight, which winner gets the title shot first? Is Colby next for Usman? And if so, when will it be announced? Also, give me predictions for those 3 fights. Asking a lot of us there, Combat Chief.
Man.
But we got you. So I'll answer that first real quick. Colby Usman is absolutely the next fight. It's just a matter of Usman getting a little healthy, and then I'm sure we'll hear something relatively soon on that regard. Woodley Lawler and Askren Masvidal, that's an interesting question. To me, I think the winner of Askren Masvidal probably has the inside track.
Absolutely. Woodley Lawler, it's a little bit too soon, I think, for either one of those guys to get the title shot next. I think Askren Masvidal is I mean, that's pretty close to a title eliminator fight in my eyes.
The only way that I could see it going where maybe it's not is if Tyron Woodley wins and Jorge Masvidal wins and Colby Covington wins. Because Colby Covington and Jorge Masvidal are training partners. I know I'm pretty confident they would fight if it's for a title. But in that case, you also have an opportunity to do Woodley versus Covington, which I still would like to see at some point. So that would be a harder decision for me.
That's true. It would be a harder decision if Covington beats Usman. That would make things a little bit different. Although, yeah, maybe not that different because Covington Askren could also be.
Oh, that would be sensational.
That would be really interesting. I look either way. I'm not complaining about that welterweight division. That is a fun division. There's a lot of cool stuff going on there.
Yeah. Let's indulge the people real quick and make 3 quick predictions, even though they're not going to hold and we're going to change our minds by the time the fight comes. I'm picking Woodley over Lawler, Askren over Masvidal, and I think Usman over Covington, but I hold the rights to change those picks down the line.
It's tough, man. I'll pick Woodley, although I'm not sure about that one. I feel like it's a really quick turnaround for a guy who was just in a really tough 5-round fight. But yeah, I'll pick Woodley. I'll go Woodley, Askren, and Usman too. I know it's not really exciting picks, but I do have reservations about the Woodley pick.
Yeah. You want to do this next one?
Sure. From Ibu 4444, Japan, etc. I missed the chat last week time, but I wanted to say thanks to Marc for coming out for the one show, and sorry for shouting you out at Hero Station. I was a bit surprised to see you during my commute. I was surprised to see you too, my friend. I had no idea what was going on. Well, I was just walking to the subway trying to go to the one championship workout. I was jet lagged and I was up all night. I did the A side. I was hanging out with you guys, and then I go on the subway and some bearded white dude in Tokyo says my name, and I'm like, where am I? What is happening? I was so confused, but it was good to see you. It was good to meet you very briefly. You
better have flashed him one of these.
I didn't know what was going on. I didn't think I would get recognized in Tokyo. I'm just trying to navigate like the subway system down there, make sure I am going the right way. And all of a sudden, some dude's like, "Hi, Marc." I'm like, what? So it was weird, but it was nice to meet you briefly. Anyway, I thought the event was pretty great with the shock Eddie loss and Shinya's win, etc. Now we've got Ryzen and Yokohama this weekend, though I'm still waffling about attending. For a question, what do you make of the Bellator Ryzen partnership that we're starting to see, King Mo, Caldwell, etc.? What are the rumors for that going forward? If you have room for 2, I've noticed a lot of backlash towards 1 since the event, weight cutting, questionable finances, etc. Talking about a subsidized product. Have you seen ESPN Plus's projected losses? I know Chatri is super annoying, but they've got a solid product, and I, for one, will support fights relatively in my time zone. What's been your takeaway having viewed behind the curtain? They've got a solid event coming up in Singapore. I think poor Sage might get smoked by Cosmo.
A lot in that question.
A lot in there. That's more than 2 questions, my friend. But I will indulge you since you shouted me out in the Hero train station.
One quick thing before we start on this. Because this is a perfect representation of what we were talking about. I think it was last week where one does so many good things right, and they have such a good product. I don't know why they choose to overstep constantly and like shoot themselves in the foot with these statements of grandeur, right? These huge statements. And they made another one this past week where Chatri said something along the lines of like almost 50 million people,
40-something million people watched
that card. Like, come on, man. Does anybody believe that? Like, I'm not gonna say you're lying, but I would love to see those figures.
And apparently it did, according to reports, it actually didn't do great ratings on TV in Japan. It actually did worse than like Pancrase does, and worse than Ryzen does, and worse than I think like Deep does.
Yeah, like
according to reports. And I don't know any of this stuff firsthand, but
like I get promoting. You want to be big. You want to say big statements. You make it's counterproductive to say statements that are so outlandish without actually providing some level of evidence for them, because then it turns the conversation, instead of just like, man, that was a really great event, to like, nah, you're kind of lying to us there, aren't you? type of thing.
Yeah, I feel like anything that comes from one, I don't think they have any credibility, unfortunately, because they make all those provably false statements. I mean, it's a shame because I love their product. I love watching their shows. The talent is indisputable, and the fights are really exciting. The rule set is exciting. I dig one, and it kind of sours, kind of turns me off when I see people say, "Oh, this is the biggest martial arts event in the history of the planet." I mean, no, it's not, bro. I mean,
and you don't want to turn Marc Raimondi off.
No, you don't. No, you do not. But I do. But I do like one, and I no disrespect to the fighters. I think the fighters are fantastic. As far as Ryzen and Bellator, I've heard a lot of very interesting things about Ryzen and Bellator in the future. There, I mean, I think that there's still discussions about Kyoji Horiguchi coming to the States and fighting Caldwell this year at some point. I'm not sure exactly when that will be just yet. And I've heard that Bellator might be a part of Ryzen's year-end show in Saitama on New Year's Eve. I heard that there could be a heavy Bellator contingent on that show, possibly a Bellator versus Ryzen type of card, which would be really, really cool. I really dig that. Hopefully I can go. Hopefully I can go back to Japan for that one.
Yeah. All right, cool. You want to keep moving on?
Yeah, let's go to Danko Libre. Whittaker versus Adesanya. Hola to the California King and Shaun. I sleep in employee break rooms. Al-Shatti. Actually, by the way, before we move on, Danko Libre, do you have any updates for us, Shaun, from that mishap last week?
Dude, so I'm not gonna go on like a Marriott rant right now because the people in that Marriott were wonderful. All the employees were great. They were fantastic the entire way. That morning after the A-side, I spoke to the GM of that hotel, and she made several promises to me, none of which were ever upheld. And I never spoke to her again. And she didn't seem to be into work the entire rest of the week. So I left. I basically stayed in that Marriott the entire week, getting no anything for sleeping in their paying to sleep in their employee break room. And they have since not responded to me. She, in particular, the GM, has not responded to me at all. No, again, the people in that Marriott were wonderful. I loved them all. The GM is going to be answering to my wife at this point. She is on this case and she is hunting for blood. She is not happy.
You slept in the employee break room and they didn't do anything for you?
Not only that, but I paid to sleep in the employee break room.
You paid for that night?
I don't know. I have no idea at this point.
Oh,
I genuinely don't understand how that. I've never dealt with worse customer service in my life from like a GM type of executive. It's crazy to me that would be how they handled it, but whatever.
You didn't even get like an extra mint on your pillow? Like
nothing. I was promised a bottle of wine and a couple days of Marriott points and something else, and I didn't get any of those.
Oh my God. That is horrendous customer service.
Oh, dude, my wife is furious. She lives for these type of things where she can like phone call after phone call on a company, so she's gonna make their life hell.
I still can't get over that you slept in the employee break room that night. My God, the things we do.
It was funny too because the poor woman who was sort of my partner in misery for that night, and she slept in the lobby. We saw each other like out in Atlanta, out and about, like four or five times throughout the week. We just kept running into each other, and every time it was like, "Hey!"
You guys have like a bond. You're like Adesanya and Gastelum. You have a bond between you, bonds of war.
Every time we just had a quick conversation about, hey, they do anything for you? No? All right. No, me neither. All right. That's great.
Wow. And speaking of Adesanya versus Gastelum, the question from Danko Libre is, who do you favor in the UFC middleweight unification bout between Whittaker and Adesanya, and why? Shaun?
Oh my goodness, man. I cannot wait for this fight. This is actually probably one of my most anticipated fights of 2019 now. I'm not going to lie. We spoke about it a little bit when we were talking about...
that has to be like in Australia or New Zealand, right? It has to.
Oh, 100%. That's a good way to start this, right? Because that absolutely has to be in Australia or New Zealand. It has to be a stadium. And I was talking to a couple different Australian and New Zealand Oceania media over the course of the week, and all of them believe that this could be big enough to do that, absolutely, and sell out and just be tremendous. And this deserves it, man. This is such a cool sort of moment we have reached in this division where both of these guys are from regions that are not particularly well represented in MMA, or at least not historically. It seems like now Oceania is becoming more and more recognized in MMA, but that could be such a cool local event. Like, we do not get events like that really ever in this sport, and just to have that kind of local flair, national flair behind it would be tremendous. But also, like we said, one of my favorite parts about the co-main event on Saturday was how much we learned about both guys. And so going into this fight, that is why this is so anticipated for me, because now we understand what Israel Adesanya is made of, and Robert Whittaker's made of the same damn thing. He is made of steel and guts, and just he is willing to lay it all on the line. We saw it in the Yoel Romero fight. He is one of the toughest human beings on the planet, and I think Israel Adesanya is as well. Both of these guys are willing to go to lengths that very few human beings are able to go to for in the pursuit of athletic glory. Someone might die in this fight. This is just seems like the craziest battle of wills. And also the way that I think that the dynamic between their two personalities, Israel's going to draw something out of Robert that we haven't seen before. I think just in the lead up to it, with all sort of the inside references to the nationalism and just the New Zealand Australia divide and just all of this, I think he's going to draw something out of Robert that will be really fun to see. Also, in some way, Robert Whittaker is just a supersized version of Kelvin Gastelum, right? Because he is excellent, all well-rounded fighter. He can slip punches tremendously. He can mix stuff up inside. He can wrestle. He is kind of just a bigger version of Kelvin, and Kelvin was figuring out a couple things to give Izzy some problems. I cannot wait for this fight.
I have no idea how that fight goes, honestly. If you ask me right now, I have no clue. And like you said, I think that Adesanya has already kind of started poking the bear, calling Whittaker a fake Aussie and kind of making fun of
Amazi. Amazi is what he kept calling
Amazi, because he was born in New Zealand, of course, Whittaker. It's a really, really interesting fight, and I think that it would be the biggest moment for the sport in that area of the world by a great deal. And it could end up being pivotal for that part of the world as far as gaining new interest, gaining more fighters. I mean, it could be really like almost a mainstream making of MMA down in Australia and New Zealand. The fight itself,
it could be like Anderson Silva versus Vitor did for Brazil. That fight wasn't in Brazil, but it blew up Brazilian MMA in a way.
Right, and that's when like all the Brazilian media outlets started to cover MMA, and then they still do for the most part. It's very popular in Brazil still to this day. That's a huge fight. I mean, that is a really, really enormous fight. I don't know how it goes, man. I have no idea. The one thing that I will say is that I hope that Adesanya takes the necessary time after this fight.
Oh yeah,
and heals up. I mean, we're in April now. I know Whittaker says that he can come back in August. I don't think that may not work with the UFC schedule to do that fight in August. And I don't know if it works for their schedule in September either.
October in the earliest for me. You need to give Izzy some time.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, it sounds like, I mean, October is a Las Vegas pay-per-view right now, so it's probably not going to be in October. September, I know we've heard, Abu Dhabi possibly for a Khabib fight, could also be, who knows, in Vegas also. I would like to see this fight toward the end of the year. I know that it's one of those things where you want to see it right away. Look, I want to see it right away too, but these are not action figures. These are not video game characters. They're real people. And Adesanya took a lot of damage from Kelvin Gastelum in that fight. And I want to see him. I want to see the best version of Adesanya in that fight, the best version of Robert Whittaker. And we probably only see that if it happens in like November or December, I think. And again, it sucks, but I think that would be the best for everyone if it happened later in the year.
Well, not only did he take a ton of damage, but that was his 6th fight in 14 months. Yeah. We can say it as many times as we want, but that's still very true. Like, that is outrageous.
Give that man a break, please. He deserves it. No one deserves it more than him at this point.
Also, this is a small note, but dude, credit to Israel Adesanya for coming to that press conference. No sunglasses, no nothing covering his face. He did not give an S. Like, he was embracing it, man. He looked like he got hit by a bus, and he was just about it. He didn't care. And Esther, our own Esther Lynn, the GOAT, wearing her shirt right now, got incredible photos of him. It was like one of her one of my favorite photos that she ever took was George St. Pierre. I can't remember after which fight, but it was his face is just destroyed. And he's like, yeah, he's holding the ice pack. And it's just like, that's such a visceral, like, that's what happens when you fight in this sport type of moment. And Israel's photos were the same, where it's just like, that's what can happen. Do you want to be a fighter type of thing?
And very similar to that George picture, both guys won that fight. Both guys won that fight and came out looking like that.
Ugh, crazy, man. Crazy. Well, hey, let's keep it going. The next question is coming from SJY, who wants to talk about Leslie Smith. We had a bit of good news yesterday. Will Leslie Smith try to unionize the Bellator fighters, have fighters outside the UFC in one, or Bellator try to unionize before? And so this is interesting news. Leslie Smith now signed to Bellator. She announces that yesterday. Congratulations to her. She has been through a bit of a rough road over the last year or two. This is well-deserved. She is one of the best women in the world at that weight class, so it is cool for her to get an opportunity. Marc, how do you expect this to proceed forward now with what she was doing with Project Spearhead?
Good question. I think that she'll keep up Project Spearhead, and I think she'll continue trying to organize fighters, maybe not as directly as before, since she'll be working for a competitor to the UFC. I don't see her trying to unionize Bellator fighters in that same way. It's very different because the UFC has, I mean, if we're being honest, the UFC has the largest market share of the top fighters in the world by a pretty fair margin, by a pretty large margin. And I think that if you're gonna start a union in a sport, you don't do it with like, and again, this is not a direct comparison. I don't mean to be insulting or disrespectful, but you don't start a union first in the CFL, right? You don't start in like the G League. And again, I don't think Bellator is a minor league. I think Bellator is very good, but the UFC is still top dog. Let's not kid ourselves. So you don't start a union right away in one of those smaller leagues. You do it with the top dog, and I think that she'll continue to push that. Although she couldn't be in the union herself because she's with another promotion. But yeah, same thing that you said. Good luck to Leslie Smith. She'll be fighting at 145 pounds, so she'll be going up in weight. So it'll be interesting to see her against like the Julia Budds of the world. But the one thing about Leslie Smith fights is that they're always exciting. She's always in good fights.
Oh yeah, that's the thing, right? She's always in good fights, and she's always exciting, which was why it was such a shame that she wasn't able to compete really for the last year or so. So, like you said, good luck to her. I'm very happy that she got an opportunity.
Yeah. Let's move on. Another question from SJY: cost and profit margin. We talk a lot about fighters' pay, but do we know how much it costs to run an event? What the profit margin is for an event? We don't know the exact numbers because again, these are not public numbers, although it does seem like Endeavor might be going public soon, which will be
that might change. That might change. That would be very, very interesting if they went public, because then some of that stuff is available for us to dig into.
Yeah. So we don't know how much it costs to run an event. We don't know the profit margin, but we know that the UFC makes very good revenue at the end of the year. They make a very good profit at the end of the year, and the last 2 years have been record-breaking profits. So we don't know per event, but we do know the UFC is making a very, very good amount of profit.
This is more of a speculative question, but as a journalist, I mean, this is sort of what we do, right? Like, do you think that would be the breaking point that we have all anticipated, thought would need to happen for some level of collective bargaining, some level of fighters to come together? As if this company went public, we were able to dig into the numbers and see how much they actually make, and put that out there, and fighters would see how little probably of a percentage of all of this that they're making. Do you think that would be some breaking point, or is it just not, it's too far gone at this point?
No, there'll be some tweets, and that's about it. I think. I don't think that. Yeah, I don't know
I agree with you. Sadly, I agree with you.
I don't know what at this point it would take to kind of rile the fighters like that. I just don't know. The climate is not right. Doesn't feel right now. I thought there was some momentum a few years ago, but it's pretty much it's DOA right now. I there's nothing.
Yeah. I don't know.
The Ali Act, I mean, that's in Congress, but I mean, will it get voted on? It's in the House. I don't know if it'll get. I don't even know if it'll get voted on, let alone approved by the House. And then if it does make it to Dear Leader, I think that it'll probably get vetoed. I mean, there's a relationship there with him in the UFC and Dana White, so there's an incentive, there's a political incentive to not pass that law. So, not really not bullish about fighters' rights issues in the next few years, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, hey, next one's coming from the MMA Fighting page. Last few, and then we'll move to Twitter. Bama92 asked about sucker punches. Did the UFC handle the Leon Edwards Jorge Masvidal incident correctly? Seems like Jorge didn't get reprimanded. He didn't. And other fighters weren't sent the message that there are consequences to not restraining yourself. I am concerned that the Masvidal Askren fight won't happen because Masvidal seems to have a temper of a toddler, this is his words, and may go after Askren prior to the fight, possibly in hopes of not getting embarrassed in the real fight. Okay, this is going into strange places.
Yeah.
I am not sure why everyone thought the Edwards incident was so cool. In my opinion, you are not proving much throwing a sucker punch in a fight that everyone knows will be broken up within seconds. So I want to address two things on that real quickly. One, this fight will absolutely go through because Jorge Masvidal, more than anything else, and more so than most guys in this industry, that man is a prize fighter. Yeah. That man is a prize fighter through and through. He understands what all of this is about. He understands that this is about a paycheck first and foremost, and you don't get that paycheck if you don't get to the point where you can actually have the actual fight and make that paycheck. He understands that way better than a lot of these guys. He's not going to do anything to jeopardize this fight beforehand. He'll probably get in Ben Askren's face. There'll probably be some level of a hallway confrontation, but it's not going to escalate even to, I think, to the degree where the Max Griffin fight did this past weekend, where he's having to like walk around with security basically in his hotel and things like that. Which was, by the way, ridiculous that he was having to deal with that. Second point, that possibly in hopes of not getting embarrassed in the real fight. What? First, yeah, that wasn't my second point, but I just saw that again. That was, Jorge Masvidal's worried about getting embarrassed. No, the reason that this was so cool and why everyone thought this was so cool is the same thing that it goes back to like the Diaz brothers, right? I think in this game, we just like the idea of realness, the idea of these characters are actually, these aren't characters. These are how these guys actually are. To some level, that degree of dangerousness or just is interesting. It's very interesting to people, just observers, right? Of when Nate Diaz flips people off in the hotel and starting stuff there, or even the can throwing incident and things like that. Like people eat that up, and it's just the realness. People want realness from their athletes, especially in combat sports. And I think few people epitomize that, like a Jorge Masvidal or the Diaz brothers, who, as someone who wrote a 10,000 word piece on Nate Diaz, speaking to all these people, if you ran into Nate Diaz and said that same stuff to him in person, he's going to fight you right there. And there's something just endearing about that.
100%. And also Masvidal has that charisma about him that makes people want to engage with him. And Bama 92, buddy, pal, Jorge Masvidal has fought 46 times, and this has never been an issue for him getting to the fight because he got into a scuffle with anyone before the fight. He's fought 46 times all over the freaking world. I don't know why you'd think all of a sudden this would be a problem right now. That's a ridiculous thing to say or think. I mean, are you coming? Are you new? Are you new here? He's been around for a long time, Masvidal. He fought in the backyard. I mean, come on. So that's ridiculous. And we talked about the whole thing where, are we celebrating this thing where he basically, he went and he punched Edwards in the face.
And you got called a sissy a bunch by comment.
What's that? Yeah. I got crapped on about it because I laid out the reasons why it was not a good thing in real life in society, but also why we all loved it so much, because that's just where we're at. I mean, this is unfortunately the sport, and I agree with Dana White, which is not.
I was going to say that's a new sentence. That's a new sentence I've never heard from you.
I agree with him when he said that the staff backstage at that event should have done a better job keeping those guys apart. I mean, you should never have Jorge Masvidal just waltzing over to Leon Edwards unmolested.
Look,
and no one get between them.
hold on, because I'm gonna defend the UFC staff here really briefly. Because if that man is like you said, waltzing with his hands behind his back, he looks very unassuming. He looks very unassuming in that moment. He looks very unthreatening. He really unleashed the 3-piece Minnesota combo. I mean, in seconds. Like if I saw Jorge Masvidal walking up to someone like that, my next thought is like, oh, he's within the next 2 seconds, he's gonna be punching this guy.
I mean, okay, that's a fair point, but Jorge Masvidal is not like everyone else.
He really
fighting to Jorge Masvidal is like going to the bathroom and brushing your teeth. Like it's like breathing. He fights like he breathes. I mean, it doesn't matter.
He really put up a nice veil of innocence there for the first leg.
There's no veil of innocence. That's just his default. That's his default.
But yes, that should be fun when we get to there. We're a little bit away from there, but that's gonna be a fun one.
Yes, it is. Yes,
I am bummed that we didn't get the back and forth between those guys at that press conference, but there will be time. There will be time.
True.
Next one coming from Zaku Kogeki. I feel like we never get that right. Fighter contracts. Why does it always seem like some fighters are negotiating a new contract between each fight? Don't they sign multi-fight deals for set amounts of money, etc.? Thanks as always for the great content. This is a simple one, and it's just if you have that leverage, you got to use it. Because the most UFC contracts are very long. They prefer these 8-fight contracts, these 6-fight contracts, because then they lock you in at that number, right? And even if you say you sign that contract as someone broaching into the top 15, and then you become a top 3, top 5 fighter, you're still stuck on that top 15 contract. Yeah. And meanwhile, they can cut you at any moment's notice. It's very one-sided contract. So the reason you see fighters always renegotiating if they have the leverage to do it is because when you have the leverage, you got to do it. You have to look out for number one always. If the UFC is not going to honor their contracts in a way that, like I said, they can cut you in any way they want, you got to do the same. It's got to be I don't know, whatever. I said
yeah, 100%. I mean, Conor McGregor, like it was like news before the Khabib fight, and I didn't know why it was news because that he signed like a 5-year contract extension with the UFC. It was like a new 5-year deal. Dana White said, but Conor McGregor signs a new contract before every single fight. He renegotiates a new contract before every single fight. You think the contract with Khabib was the same one that he fought Eddie Alvarez on? No, it's a whole new contract, and the Eddie Alvarez contract was different than the one before that. That's just how it goes when you have that leverage. And like you said, if you have that leverage, you have to use it.
Yeah, that's a simple one.
Because the UFC will.
They definitely will.
They're gonna use it.
They definitely will. You want to get this next one?
Yeah, Lucian.
And this should be the last one on MMA fighting. Then we'll hit some Twitter questions, and then we'll get the promo and then get out of here.
Lucian, Khabib Poirier title unification fight. Most fantastic spring day for the both of you esteemed journalists.
So pleasant.
Thanks, Lucian. Before anything else, I just want to say how much I'm looking towards the Khabib Poirier fight and how awesome the story there is. I mean, on one side, we have the scrappy dude who has been counted out so many times and who has faltered before, but now has truly claimed his championship by constantly proving himself against the best there are. And on the other side, we have the Dagestani destroyer who just seems to make all his opponents look lost against him. The narratives going into the match are already making me utterly excited. Having written that, I don't think it is a stretch to state that Khabib is without a doubt favored in that match. So I was curious, what do you see being Poirier's edges in that fight? Where do you see his chances laying against Khabib?
I cannot wait for this fight.
Oh yeah,
I am the biggest Dustin Poirier fan at this point. What this guy has overcome over the course of his career, having to go through 22 UFC fights and all these different iterations and chapters of his career before he got to this opportunity, and then taking full advantage of this opportunity against the best featherweight in the entire world. That was magical, man. That was inspiring what Dustin Poirier has been able to put together, especially these last 4 fights where he has seemingly become the best version of himself. He is in his prime, and he's right into this fight into his prime, and I am here for it. What challenges does he present Khabib? I think it's almost similar to the Conor McGregor fight in one respect, right? Because what were we talking about before the Conor Khabib fight? We were saying that Conor can put Khabib's lights out with one shot. I think that is true still with Dustin. I would say Dustin, like we said earlier in this show, Dustin to me is the most overlooked power puncher in this entire division. He might be the best, most powerful puncher in this entire division. He has that power that can put anybody on notice at a moment's notice. And Khabib fights go long generally. So if you have 5 rounds to work within that, or 4 rounds to work within that, and one shot can change everything, that inherently will be interesting. Also, though, he has several aspects that Conor does not have at this point in his career. He has the cardio to go for days. We saw that against Max Holloway. He was fading a little bit, but he was in there still, just slugging it out the entire 25 minutes. Same thing with Justin Gaethje. In many ways, he outlasted Justin Gaethje, which is not a thing that people do. His cardio at 55 has been proven to be tremendous. Also, his just technical acumen. I think he is probably the most technical striker in the entire lightweight division at this point. He is just so controlled in there. He knows, he has complete understanding of everything he's doing. I don't know that, when can you remember him being really, really thoroughly outstruck on the feet? You know, like, it just doesn't happen.
Probably Michael Johnson, but that was more of a,
how long ago was that? Right?
Oh, I mean, it was a while ago.
That was like 2 different versions of Dustin Poirier ago. So, yeah. I mean, the wrestling, Khabib will absolutely have the advantage, and he can absolutely drown Dustin there. But there is a lot of intrigue in this for me, and it's not nearly as much of a wash as some people are making it out to be.
2016 was the Michael Johnson fight,
and he was a completely different person at that point.
Yeah, and it was also like the fight went 90 seconds. I mean, it was a very short fight. It was a quick. He got caught, and the time before that was McGregor. That was the only other time that he really got outclassed in striking.
Yeah,
and that was 145.
What's your read on this?
It's tough. I mean, obviously, I have to favor Khabib just because he's never given us any reason to not favor him in a fight like this. I think that his wrestling, I don't know if anyone can stop it. The one thing I'll say about Poirier is that he does have the striking and the power to keep Khabib honest on the feet, and he's got a sneaky submission game on the ground. I mean, he's got a better jiu-jitsu game than, like, say, Conor McGregor does. And he's a good defensive wrestler, and he's a good offensive wrestler too. So I mean,
also his cage awareness. I think people don't speak about that as much as they should, because you never really find him getting into spots on the cage where he's in a disadvantage, like a disadvantageous type of position where he's against the fence and he's getting trapped or something like that. He has very good sense of where he needs to be in the cage at all times, which is very important against a wrestler who can drown you like a Khabib.
I agree. I think it's a very fascinating fight. I think that it's certainly not a rout. It's not a wash. I think that Poirier will be very competitive in that fight. It'll probably, I don't know if it is finished. I think it may go the distance, and I look forward to checking that out. And I feel kind of the same way about Poirier as I do about Adesanya, where I just hope that he takes the time that he needs and heals up, because he didn't take as much damage as like Izzy or Gastelum or Holloway, but that was still a hard fight.
No, he was actually the only one out of the 4 of them that kind of came away from that looking kind of okay. Like his face,
okay, but it was still a hard fight. It was a hard fight. So yeah. Hope he takes the time he needs.
Well, hey, let's move to some Twitter questions, man.
Yes, sir.
All right, I'll go first because I got one queued up. This was from yesterday from our man Brian Yule, and this is a tough one. So we're gonna have to work on this. Rank these 5 title fights.
Oh yeah.
From number 1 to number 5, and I guess whatever criteria you want, whether it's your favorite or just everything you saw, however you want to rank it. So these are the 5 options: Lawler, McDonald 2, Lawler Condit, Jones Gustafsson, Silva Sonnen, Gastelum Adesanya. That's a rough one.
I mean, those are 5 of the best fights of all time. Period.
So how are you ranking those on whatever capacity of rankings you want to go?
All right. So I will go, and this is tough. This is very, very tough. I would go. Wow. Okay. So I would go Lawler McDonald 1. Jones Gustafsson 2. Gastelum Adesanya 3, Silva Sonnen 4, and Lawler Condit 5. I think.
Lawler Condit is last.
Yeah, I mean, look at who it's going up against.
Wow. No, I mean that's totally fair. So you put Izzy Gastelum at 3, you said?
Yeah, yep. Behind Lawler McDonald's 2 and Jones Gustafson.
Okay. I think I have close to your rankings. I would go Lawler McDonald 2 first still. That's my favorite fight of all time. I mean, I don't know. It's going to be hard to eclipse that. I would go Jones Gustafson right after that. I'll go that number 2 just because that's really still the only time we've ever seen Jones pushed. And that was incredible to watch in the moment. Yep. The level of expectations we had going into it.
Correct.
Crazy. And then, I would put Gastelum Adesanya 3 after that. And then I would put Lawler Condit and then Silva Sonnen 5. So I would just switch those two. But man, that what an insane thing we just saw on Saturday. We've said it a billion times, but that fight was a treat. It was so
the reason why I put Silva Sonnen 4 instead of 5 is because it maybe wasn't as good as a fight, but the story there and the finish was historic and epic. The actual fight itself, we've seen better fights.
For sure. I think for me, the fifth round of Lawler Condit is just maybe the greatest round ever, or at least one of. Yeah. So that to me, is why I put it over it. But you can make an argument either way.
Yeah, certainly. Head back to the Twitter questions. I had one. Where is it at? Oh, here we go. Okay. From Tragic Bronson, our pal. During Griffin versus Imadaev, the ref was quick to take a point after 2 to 3 cage grabs. Many times refs will give multiple warnings with no action, even when multiple fouls have piled up. My question is, what did you guys think of this ref decision, and should more refs follow suit? Of course, that was George Allen from Georgia, the ref who did that. Took 1 point from Imadaev in the first round for cage grab.
The legend, George Allen, who I also saw, who I spotted in the midst of the Alan Jouban versus Dwight Grant fight that everyone loves so much. In between rounds, just sort of scratch his back against the cage for a good 3 to 5 seconds, Yogi Bear style. It was, I respect you, sir. I respect your willingness to do that because, hey, you got an itch, you got to scratch it. Why not? Who cares? As for the point taking, I liked the point taking a lot, man. We joke about it all the time, where it's just if I was in a fight, I would cheat because you can just cheat. You get 2 or 3 free cheats before anything can actually happen to you. If there was actual repercussions and you knew that the moment you grab the fence, it's a thing, I'm all for that. The only reason I didn't like his absolute decision was he then stood the fighters up, and at that point, Max had already completed a takedown. You keep them down there. You credit him for working, even if he didn't complete the takedown. You give him the takedown because that was the reason the fence grab happened. So I didn't like that part, but I love the point taking.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've talked to referees about this fairly often, and what I'm always told is that the referee in that moment has to weigh the severity of the foul, so the impact that it has on the fight, and also if the level of warning or whatnot. It didn't seem like Allen gave any warning at all. It seemed like he went right to the point, which I know a lot of fans are happy with because it was a really blatant cage grab and it did affect the fight in that way. I would say most referees probably would not go to that directly though. And I'm okay with that. I would say I usually prefer a verbal warning, and then if it happens again, you should definitely, especially if it's a severe, impactful cage grab or a foul, then you take the point away. So I would say maybe he went a little bit too quick with it, and I also agree with you too that he should have granted Griffin that position because he earned that position and it was taken away by the foul. Therefore, it should have went back. Instead of standing them up and separating them, it should have been on the ground when they came back up to fighting.
Yeah, I agree with you. Let's try to hit as many of these as we can.
Yeah.
You got something for me?
No.
I got one. I got one. This is coming from, I think this might be another one from Brian Ooh, who wants to know who is the most likely opponent for Frankie Edgar? Is it Max Holloway, Renato Moicano, or Brian Ortega again?
That's a good question. I mean, that's a different answer than I would have had maybe a few days ago because we now know what happened with Holloway and Poirier. Although I think that Edgar is probably going to want to fight again before Holloway were to get back. So I think there may still be another fight ahead of him before that shot against Holloway.
Also, I mean, if Volkanovski beats Jose Aldo, that's the guy.
That is very true. That is very true. I don't know. That's a tough one. It really depends on timing, honestly. I guess it could be Moicano, could be. Although Ortega, in some ways, makes more sense. Although Ortega's already beaten Edgar, but Ortega's got to kind of work his way back into the title picture. It really just depends on timing. I think it's hard to say.
I think it's going to be one of two options. I think it's going to be Max Holloway if Volkanovski loses.
Okay.
Then it's Frankie is the obvious guy. If Volkanovski wins, Frankie's going to probably have to have another one. And in that case, I can see it either being like a Moicano type or maybe like a Yair Rodriguez or a Korean Zombie, somebody that you didn't see coming in that regard.
Well, he's already fought Yair, and that did not go very well for Yair. So, although that was a few years ago now. So, yeah, I mean, the division is really interesting, and Moicano is coming off the loss to Aldo. There's also like someone like Josh Emmett who's kind of there, who just knocked the hell out of Michael Johnson a few weeks ago. So I mean, it's interesting. I'm also anticipating the return of Miroslav Bektic, who can make some noise in that division too this year if he gets back from injury.
Oh man, Mark, your connection's killing me right now.
Yeah, what happened? Oh yeah, it's all fuzzy, right? What did I do?
I don't know. I think you're just gonna have to power through it. Close down any like applications you have going on. I'll keep things moving while you're working on that. Yeah. This next one's coming from Kuka Baluda, who last time I said your name, someone told me that I had said something that I shouldn't have in Portuguese, so that's great. Appreciate you setting me up for that. He says, Brazilian greetings. How much more respect do you all have for Johnnie Walker after Khalil Roundtree's impressive performance on Saturday? Does that raise his stock? That is a very valid point because Johnnie Walker made mincemeat of Khalil Roundtree, and he just absolutely dominated Eric Anders, knocking him down 4 times in round 2, breaking a light heavyweight record for knockdowns in a fight. He really seems as though he has turned his career around with this move to Thailand and sort of learning how to use his tools responsibly. Danny Segura had a very interesting way to put that on the MMA Hour on Monday, where he has now learned how to use his skill set in a more responsible fashion than he used to, and I think it shows. So, Mark, is what he did on Saturday? How was that? After that, how does that make you feel about what Johnnie Walker did to him?
Normally, I would say 100%. That would raise Johnnie Walker's stock in my eyes. If Johnnie Walker's stock wasn't already as high as it could be in my eyes, it doesn't get any higher than how I feel about Johnnie Walker. So, yes, I mean, I do agree, and I think that it shows how good Johnnie Walker actually is comparatively to the division. However, I already felt that way about my man Johnnie Walker. I was already on that train. I've been on that train. I've been on there for quite a while already. So I'm already at that place. Everyone else is trying to catch up to where I'm at with Johnnie Walker.
Khalil Roundtree might be a player in this light heavyweight division, though, man. Give him a little more time to develop. He seems to be putting it together. That was very, very impressive.
Dominic Reyes versus Khalil Roundtree.
I wouldn't mind that. I wouldn't mind that.
Oh, that's not bad at all. That's not bad at all. Who does Johnnie Walker fight next? I don't know.
Calm down over there.
I want to see Johnnie Walker. How we doing on Twitter? Because I turned off my tweet deck because I don't know. Am I still lagging?
No, you're doing good now. Okay.
All right, good.
Let's see. I got one here from Christian Petrilla.
Yeah.
Petrilla? God, I'm butchering your name and I'm so sorry. Do you think a Ferguson versus McGregor fight might be in the makings since they are the only two top light heavyweights with no fight, or lightweights with no fight scheduled? That would be cool. I don't think that Tony Ferguson will ever get a shot at Conor McGregor. I just don't think that's a fight that Conor wants, nor feels like does anything for him. Obviously, though, Tony Ferguson is a higher ranked person in this division, but I don't think Conor cares.
I don't think that's the fight. I think that, man,
I'd like to see it.
You don't want to see it?
I would love to see it. I think Tony would destroy him.
Wow. Okay.
Just saying.
Okay. I think that, and we talked about Khabib versus Poirier at length, and that's obviously a great fight, and it should be next. I'm not convinced that Khabib McGregor 2 is not next. I'm not convinced. I'm not. If you saw what McGregor posted on Saturday night, where he said that Poirier versus Nate Diaz is next, that means that McGregor is still angling for that rematch. I think at this point, if McGregor is going to come back, it may only be for Khabib this year. I really do. I mean, it seems like he's at an impasse with the UFC as far as negotiations go. I think he's going to push hard for the Khabib fight.
Man, I gotta say, so like, you tell me whether you agree with me on this. Are you getting a little sick of Conor McGregor just putting in his 2 cents after every single main event or every time somebody looks good? Are you getting a little sick of him putting in his 2 cents?
Yes, 100%. But because it just feels like it doesn't feel organic. It feels disingenuous.
Yeah, exactly.
The first couple of times he did it, it was like, okay, that's cool. You know, Conor's paying attention, and then, you know, he's showing respect. But he does it after every freaking fight, boxing too, and WWE.
It feels like he's just trying to constantly keep himself in the conversation without doing anything else.
I agree, because the old Conor would have like some biting remarks, and I think that's the real Conor. The real Conor has kind of like the biting remarks and kind of talks some trash, and this Conor, I guess, is better on the surface, but it just doesn't feel organic. It doesn't feel organic at all.
Well, because we have no intent. We know he has no intentions of following through on any of this, right? Like, he's not going to be fighting in a month. He's not going to be booking a fight in a couple months. So like, it just feels disingenuous.
Yeah, 100%. I'm not a huge fan of it. It doesn't feel real. It feels like it feels very insincere, and like you said a few weeks ago, and I do agree. It would be nice to see, to be talking about Conor McGregor and getting into a fight. You know, getting into a fight inside the octagon. Yeah. That would be nice. That would be nice to hear. I would like to have that conversation soon about him actually coming back, instead of just him tweeting and getting in trouble, or both at the same time. Yeah, that's my stance on that.
Here, let's do 2 quick ones, because we're always getting complaints about how little we do Twitter questions,
and they're not wrong.
They're not wrong. You just guys give us so many green questions on MMA fighting. We have to like juggle all of this. So we'll get 2 more quick ones from Twitter. This one's coming from Mystic Mike 91, who wants to know, just wanted to get your thoughts on the UFC booking Diego Sanchez versus Michael Chiesa for UFC 239. A lot of people count Diego out, but I think this is a great matchup. Can Diego's top control, cardio, and ridiculous sub defense give Chiesa problems? That's an interesting question, and actually that's a valid question, because Diego Sanchez, I feel, is very good at many of the things that Michael Chiesa is very good at. What is your thoughts on that matchup?
My thoughts on that, and even going into his last fight, Diego, which he won, is that very rarely do we see Diego lose like a grappling wrestling match in a fight. He usually only loses when he stays standing too long and absorbs damage. And for a long time, that was kind of his thing, right? Diego would just come forward and swing wildly, and he would get caught, and he would catch the other guy. It would just be a crazy brawl. But he's shown a little bit of, evolution, or at least a maturity that he didn't have, or maybe just a different kind of desire to win fights rather than just put on the best possible show for everyone. And I mean, I think that if you told me Michael Chiesa versus Diego Sanchez like last year at this time, I would be like, oh man, that's not a good fight for Diego Sanchez. And it still may not be, because I do like how Chiesa has looked at 170. and I would favor him in that matchup. But I don't think it's a wash. I don't think it's a blowout by any stretch. I think it's actually the grappling and wrestling part of that fight will be really interesting.
Yeah, I agree with everything you're saying. I don't know that I have much to add to it. I think actually that's kind of like sneaky good matchmaking. Diego's on a bit of a run. Give him that shot, right? If Diego wins that fight, suddenly you have like a late stage Diego Sanchez sort of in a position to do some stuff, which I don't think anybody saw coming.
No, but I'm here for it because the guy's entertaining, and then he talks after the fight and he says some really, really off the wall stuff, and that's also entertaining. So I'm here for it.
Yeah. We'll hear last question coming from Twitter. This one is from Kill Your Idols, who says, should interim champs attempt to defend the interim belt instead of waiting to unify and possibly getting screwed out of the undisputed title fight? What do you think, Mark? Should I guess the example for this would be Dustin Poirier, right? Should Dustin Poirier, instead of waiting for a September or something like that, should he just try to defend this interim belt?
No. Why? What? No, that's you get the title shot. That's the whole point of an interim title. You get the title shot next. That's what you do. There's no defending the interim title. No, I think that's ridiculous.
I agree.
You have that big money title opportunity right there. It's yours. You don't just defend the interim title and then risk losing it. You have it. You have the golden ticket. No, you got to cash it in.
I agree with you, and also it would feel weird to put expectations on the interim champion that are not being put on the actual champion.
Yeah, no, absolutely not. No. Sorry.
All right. That was pretty definitive. So that's about it for us. Let's hit the promo and then we'll get out of here. I will go first real quick. I know. So I'll start here, right? Because I always like to highlight the positivity in this sport in this promo whenever we can. So I have a two-parter. One is coming at you guys. You guys always telling us, sick of the clickbait. I'm sick of the negativity. Why don't you guys talk about the good parts of the sport? Last week, I was going to take you guys up on that because last week I did interviews with all of the main players at UFC 236. And that was the day after I think Conor McGregor he had punched a guy and everyone was complaining about negativity. So I was like, I'm going to test this theory. And for my interview with Dustin Poirier, who's doing tremendous charitable work consistently with all these fights, who's a very good guy who just wants to bring positivity to this. I headlined the title of my interview, something about his charitable works, about what his goals with his works are. And wouldn't you know it, it was by far the least watched interview of all of the interviews that we did that day. It's almost like you guys don't actually like the positive stories and only care about the negative stories. Come on, man. If you're going to preach that to us, you got to at least follow through when we try to highlight some positivity. All I'm saying. So in the meantime, I'm going to actually talk about some positivity. I'm going to talk about Dustin Poirier's charitable works because in a weekend where we saw really the best that mixed martial arts can offer, how great this sport, how transcendent this sport can be in its best moments, it was very cool to see also the support that these fighters have for each other and one another when it comes to these sort of opportunities that Dustin is doing. A lot has been said about what he was doing with his post-fight kits, and his goal for this one was to raise money to build a playground in his local city, and the city is from Lafayette. It was very cool all throughout the week to see the momentum build for this because Alan Jouban was the first. Eric Anders was the second. Guys who were giving their own fight kits to Dustin afterwards to be part of this fundraiser for him. And then after their fight, after these guys spent 25 minutes beating the hell out of each other and stealing each other's dreams, more or less, Max Holloway, in the ultimate act of just being a genuinely good guy, comes and gives Dustin Poirier his fight kit as well, as he told Luke Thomas yesterday. Or maybe 2 days ago, I'm not sure. At some point this week on the Luke Thomas show, he was told him that he also gave his fight kit to Dustin to auction off. It is tremendous to see these guys support each other for a good cause, and all the credit once more to Dustin for pushing for these causes, for wanting to do this. He said something to me which really struck me in my interview with him, which was, it just feels good to be a good person. That's what everybody should want to do. Couldn't have said it better myself. Congratulations to everybody. Well done by everybody involved with this charitable action. TheGoodFightFoundation.com. You can check it out. Kudos to all.
Well said, sir. Well said.
Also, click on some damn positive stories if you guys want the positive stories. I would love to bring positive stories nonstop, but you guys don't actually want them.
I got accused of clickbait. I want to get the exact. I want to get the exact reply here, so I'm not misquoting anyone. But I got accused of clickbait yesterday. I wrote this story about the ABC survey, the Association of Boxing Commission survey, right?
That's what you're clickbaiting?
Listen to this. So I wrote the story about the ABC survey. The ABC asked all the commissions in the ABC, what rule set are you guys using right now? And it came back, there are like at least 10 different rule sets being used in MMA right now, which I think is actually a big story. Bigger than some I mean, first of all, it shouldn't happen. And I'll get to that in a second, but I want to read this thing. Someone accused me of clickbaiting because I should be right. Instead of writing an article, I should be lobbying to politicians about this. What?
How's that clickbait?
Yes. Someone actually said, if you really cared about this, you would be lobbying to politicians rather than writing about it. I'm a journalist. This is what I do. This is my job. I write about issues like this.
What was the context of clickbait? Because there was nothing about clickbait in there.
Hold on. I have to get this reply. It blew my mind, and I wanted to write back, but I was like, you know what? I'll lose my mind if I write back to this.
People don't seem to understand what clickbait actually means.
No one knows what clickbait.
Clickbait is like me putting a headline out that would fool you under false pretenses to read something.
Correct.
Not me being like, hey, this is like a very interesting part of this interview in the headline. Like, that's just trying to get you to read it.
It's not clickbait. Also, I'm not clickbaiting with this. No one clicked on the damn story. no one read it. This is not a clickbaity type of topic.
Clickbait. You're always clickbaiting about the local government provisions and the rules, Marc Raimondi. Trying to get all those juicy clicks on those rules.
Yeah, I'm determined to find this now.
All right. Well, we're almost at 2 hours, so maybe
I don't care. I'm gonna find it.
Do your promo while you're doing this.
All right. So I mean, my promo is basically. It's not about clickbait. It's not about this real winner who thinks that I should be lobbying rather than writing than doing my job. I should be lobbying rather than doing my job. My clickbait is about.
Also, wait, real quick. Sorry to interrupt, but I'm sure there is a ton of money in the lobbying for state athletic commissions to change the unified rules of MMA job.
Okay, I found it. Ready? I'm not even gonna name this person's name because they don't even deserve to be named to this inanity. The tweet is, if you guys actually cared, you would lobby politicians to change this, but you don't. Just post articles for clicks. Are you kidding me? I posted that for clicks? Not because this is an important story, that there are more than 10 rule sets being used in mixed martial arts right now in North America. That the rules are different from state to state. That's a clickbait story.
Somehow this segment has turned into an airing of grievances.
Oh my God. Okay, so my promo is this, Shaun, and I will keep this brief.
I don't believe you.
It's already off the rails. But basically what I want to say is that that's ridiculous. Not just that stupid reply. The fact that there are more than 10 rule sets being used in North America for mixed martial arts is absurd. It's crazy to think that, and we've talked about this before, that fighters have to worry about if they can knee or kick a downed opponent and what the rules are from state to state. It's crazy that referees have to worry about the same thing from state to state. Is this a foul in this state? Is it a foul in California? Is it a foul in New York? Is it a foul in Nevada? It's different in all of these places in some ways, and it's just bad. It's bad for the fighters. It's bad for the sport. Mark Ratner said in 2017, the splintering of the the MMA rules, the unified rules, is making a mockery of the sport. And I could not agree more. It's ridiculous that this is continuing to happen. At this point, I supported the quote unquote new rules, the new downed fighter definition. At this point, I don't care what the rule is, as long as it's the same everywhere. It is ridiculous, Shaun. It is so. I mean, it is. I mean, this is a professional sport that's worth more than $1 billion, and there are different rules in every state. Could you imagine? Could you imagine if Jon Jones had gotten disqualified at UFC 235 because he kneed Anthony Smith in the head with one hand down, when that is a perfectly legal blow 30 miles away in California? That fight happened in Nevada. It would have been a perfectly legal blow 30 miles away down the road in California. Imagine he would have gotten disqualified. Imagine he would have lost the light heavyweight title based on a rule that is different in many different jurisdictions. It's ridiculous. Make it uniform. Don't care what you have to do. Just make it uniform. Let's be consistent. Let's show a unified front. This is not a rinky-dink 2-bit mom and pop sport anymore. This is a $1 billion sport. It's on ESPN, for Christ's sakes. Let's act like it. And also, to the guy that said that I'm clickbaiting, you're out of your freaking mind. You're out of your freaking mind.
Marc.
Oh God.
You got it out of your system?
Oh no. I'm keeping the same energy.
People wanted a perky Raimondi. They're getting a perky Raimondi, whether they like it or not. We're going on 2 hours, so we got to get out of here. That has been it.
This is the longest A-side ever.
That has been it for us. This has been another episode of the A-Side Live Chat Podcast. We will be back next week with much more to discuss. It should be fun. I am looking forward to it. In the meantime, I hope all of you guys have a wonderful rest of your weekend. Replays going up on all the places that you would expect it to. My name is Shaun Al-Shatti. That man is Marc Raimondi. This has been the A-Side Live Chat Podcast. Thank you once again. We love you, and we will see you next week.
A-Side.